Hey, everyone. Welcome to Storytelling Time, the place where every story comes alive. If you love getting lost in thrilling tales, gripping mysteries, and epic adventures, you're in the right spot. I'm your storyteller, and here, we don't just tell stories, we bring them to life. Whether it's fantasy, mystery, horror, or even a bit of comedy, we're all about immersion. So grab a snack, get comfy, and prepare for a journey that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single chapter. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join the Storytelling Time family. Let's dive into the stories that await, starting now. Malachi's lungs burned, each gasp a ragged tear in his chest. The city was a labyrinth of shadows and sudden, blinding neon, and he was lost, utterly and hopelessly lost. His thin legs pumped, propelling him deeper into the maze of backstreets, the muffled thud of heavy boots echoing his own frantic heartbeat. He'd been running for what felt like hours, since the moment the hulking brute known as Dozer had collapsed in a heap, his stolen jacket clutched in Malachi's trembling hands. It had been an accident, a desperate, clumsy scramble for survival, but he knew, with a chilling certainty, that it wouldn't matter to Dozer's family. He veered sharply around an overflowing dumpster, the stench of rotting garbage and stale beer assaulting his nostrils, and then, nothing. A brick wall, scarred with decades of grime and the crude, vibrant declarations of anonymous artists, rose before him. Dead end. The quiet escape he'd hoped for dissolved into a whimper. As dead ends went, this one was particularly expressive. Its graffiti was a raw, poetic testament to the city's underbelly, a jarring mosaic of despair and defiance. A large, vein-riddled penis dominated one section, its crudity almost comical, while beside it, an oblong feminine face with razor teeth grinned in lurid red, green, and white. Malachi barely registered the grotesque beauty, his eyes darting back to the narrow alley mouth. The footsteps behind him grew louder, more deliberate. A low, guttural chuckle scraped against the silence. Would you look at that? Malachi squeezed his eyes shut for a fraction of a second, then forced them open. The man who'd hounded his steps for blocks emerged from the gloom, his silhouette framed by the sickly yellow glow of a distant street lamp. A chain-wrapped baseball bat dragged along the ground, the metallic rasp a chilling counterpoint to the man's casual tone. Malachi tried to slow his racing heart, but it hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. More people congealed from the shadows behind the first man, like walking clots of darkness. They were hulking, broad-shouldered figures, their movements fluid and predatory. Malachi turned to face them, the large, blood-stained leather coat swaying on his thin frame. He raised his open hands, a gesture of surrender, of peace. His throat clicked when he swallowed, dry and raw. The stranger with the bat stepped fully into the jaundiced light, revealing acid-washed jeans and a similar leather jacket, adorned with an alarming number of dangling chains. Over his heart, a flaming three-headed dog patch snarled, its stitched eyes burning. Shoulder-length hair, slick with what looked like grease but shimmered oddly in the dim light, framed a face that was both handsome and cruel. "You've made some wrong choices today, friend," the man said, his voice a low rumble. He propped the bat on one shoulder and spun on his heel, the many chains dangling from his pockets and coat spinning and glittering like a macabre disco ball. "Introductions then, they call me Chains." He gestured vaguely at the mass behind him. "Proud papa of the Hell Dogs." "I don't want trouble," Malachi croaked, his voice barely a whisper. Chains laughed, a harsh, grating sound. His gloved hand creaked on the handle of the bat. "Trouble? We're past trouble, don't you think?" His eyes, sharp and calculating, dropped to Malachi's coat, lingering on the patch. "Seeing as we share a sense of fashion. But I don't know you." Malachi followed the man's gaze, his stomach churning. The matching dog patch on the breast of his own coat, the one he'd stripped from Dozer's cooling body. Fuck. It was an accident. Accident? Chains repeated, his voice laced with mock incredulity. The group behind him chuckled, a low, rumbling chorus. Now, I wasn't the biggest fan of Dozer. He had cuntish tendencies. Had the vocabulary of a brain-damaged child and the aggression of a three-nut boar with a splinter in its dick. But he was ours. And we, he gestured at the gathered mass, are a family with an understanding. We protect our own. Malachi looked at each of them. All wore patched leather, though many were modified. Some without sleeves, others high-collared, most vests. Their eyes, even in the dim light, held a predatory gleam. Why, you can have it back. A sly smile cut Chain's face, a chilling glee at impending violence shining through his eyes. Well, thank you. Chain's laugh was slow and exaggerated, drawing out the syllables. Sweat rolled down Malachi's forehead as he peeled the coat off, the blood-darkened patches of the baggy green shirt underneath sticking to his wiry frame. Long arms with sharp, bony elbows extended from the short sleeves, looking almost too long for his body. I didn't know he had such a devout family. I would have let it pass. I'm gonna stop you right there. The bat struck the concrete with a sharp thwack, emphasizing the last two words. If Dozer did something, broke some rule, looked at the wrong person cross-eyed or pissed in a family's milk, well, that would be unfortunate, but it would be for us to punish him. All the joviality bled from his face, replaced by a cold, hard stare. Not you. Malachi held the coat out, his hands trembling. Chain sauntered forward and stuck the bat out. Malachi hung the coat on it, the stubbed spikes of the chain catching the yellowed lights of the surrounding buildings. A few silhouettes peeked from behind curtains above, then vanished. No one would call the police. If they did, none would show till morning. With a frown, Chain sized up Malachi. I finally understand where the phrase rail thin comes from. He pivoted the bat till the jacket dangled behind him. The biggest woman Malachi had ever seen stepped from the shadows, all muscle and menace, with a vest straining against her broad, muscular shoulders. A foot-high mohawk added to her impressive height. She took the coat and slung it over her shoulder. Chain saw Malachi's eyes widen. That's Fangs. She's with me. Grow big in the city. Not the city, Malachi said, his voice gaining a strange, distant quality. It's the pits. The pits? Chain's smile faltered. Don't insult her. She's got a mean streak. No, Malachi said, tilting his head to stare at the night sky above, though only the orange glow of light pollution was visible. This place. It used to be called the pits. An old empire dug a hole. Threw their criminals in and gave them a choice, fight and earn freedom, or cower and serve. He was sad. There was too much light pollution for stars. Too much regular pollution for clear skies. The pit wasn't just a hole. The land is sturdy. Holds its shape. Tunnels hold. Buildings do not sink. My, Malachi. Chains laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. Got a bit of a brain in that misshapen head of yours. I like history. Not a lot to do growing up except read. Malachi's gaze drifted back to the wall. The pits and tunnels were sealed. Guarded. Criminals tossed in the arena at night. Left on their own. A whole second city bloomed underground, run by the worst of the worst and the best of the worst. More death in the tunnels than in the arena. No census taken, so supplies were always scarce. The empire above didn't care what was happening below. Didn't understand that kind of hunger and thirst, that intensity of violence. That level of survival. Chains began stalking around Malachi with slow, deliberate steps, the bat resting on his shoulder. He slowed down when he was behind the thin man. Malachi swallowed, trying not to shake. Standing behind Malachi, Chains gripped the bat in both hands. Survival. Yeah. We know a bit about that. He squinted, one eye closed, lining it up with the skinny man's head. Sometimes it's about setting an example. Sending a message. He drew back. Malachi closed his eyes. Chains swung. The bat missed by a centimeter. Malachi gasped, his hair rustled by the weapon's swift passage. The onlookers laughed, a chorus of delighted cackles. Smiling, Chains rested the bat to his shoulder and resumed the slow stalking circle around his prey. Malachi cleared his throat. Any attempts to dig and escape were met with rivers of boiling oil and torches. Sealed the tunnels shut like a flesh wound. So they dug down. Fascinating. But irrelevant. It's not. Generations passed in the pit. People were the only constant resource. They ate each other. Made furniture from their pieces. As decoration. As cattle. They grew bigger. Stronger. More violent. Fangs spat on the ground. Damn right. Several of the onlookers fist-bumped and grinned. Cannibalism was the standard. Arena fighters lived like royalty. But fighters that had never been above ground began to show. Pale and huge. Vicious, with sharpened teeth. Covered in hair like fur or void of hair altogether. Fighting with strange weapons or none at all. The Empire called them Vrickelans. Lycoan. Rumors spread that the pit bred monsters. Monsters, Chains said, turning his smile on the onlookers. Ain't we all? Malachi took a deep breath. Maybe they were right. There's something wrong with this place. Paths that don't make sense. He turned to the dead end and its graffiti. Alleys that go nowhere. Did you know there's only 4 ways in or out of the city? 4. Roads that intersect in an X. X marks the spot. Chains stopped in front of Malachi, rested the tip of the bat against Malachi's chest, twisting it to bunch the shirt. Jump to now. The Empire long forgotten. Modernization takes over. When people started disappearing, it was rumors. When mutilated bodies were found, it became myth. People stopped coming to watch the arena. Started throwing food and animals into the pit as offerings. To appease the monsters. Then they started dropping in their dead. By the time they used live sacrifices, the Empire had already collapsed. Chains had stopped smiling. Malachi hadn't seen it disappear. The gang leader didn't look upset. His expression was blank. Stoic. Shadows covered his eyes. He was still as ice. When the modern world found this place again, they just sealed it up. Didn't explore the tunnels, just filled everything with stone, dirt, and concrete. Built a city on top. But those secret places the monsters had escaped from were still there, hidden and open. Chains kept the bat steady. It didn't waver or shake. Malachi's eyes traced up the bat. The mirror gleam was tarnished green near the wrapped leather of the handle. He cocked his head. People tell stories now. That the city was built on top of a hellgate. That creatures roamed the streets eating children. Monsters and creatures. Always separate. The young and the old have been saying that the two fight sometimes at night. Creatures roaming in packs. Monsters in families. Sounders, Chains said. Malachi met his eyes. With a smile, Chains continued, they say monsters travel in sounders. Like families of feral pigs. His lips twitched in a smirk. There and gone. Malachi sneered. Ugly word. Appropriate. Chains lifted the bat to an inch away from Malachi's nose. Good thing it's all just kid stories. Malachi wrapped his thin arms over his midsection. Nothing is ever that clear-cut. No. I suppose it isn't. Chains thrust the bat forward. Fast. Malachi managed to twitch his head so it missed by centimeters. But the gang leader pressed it to the skinny man's cheek. Malachi hissed and jerked away as the skin sizzled, a streak of reddened skin left behind. Chuckling, Chains sauntered backwards, never turning away. Dipped this beauty in silver. Chain and all. It's a good deterrent for the, spooky things that stalk the night. Malachi took deep, uneven breaths, long arms stretching out as he pressed back into the brick. Pack, Chain said. That's also appropriate. He gave the exaggerated, intentional laugh. With each step away, the shadows slid over his face. His eyes shone yellow. More feral eyes glowed from the dark. The visible grins had become sharp and hungry. Malachi tried to sink into the brick. Sweat shone on his sallow skin. You hunt each other as much as you hunt everything else. Every pack has hierarchy. And we don't all get along. But the Hell Dogs? We're the biggest. The meanest. We own this town, so we keep it safe. I'm not a threat. Fangs spat. Says the man walking around in our dead brother's coat. When Chains grinned, his teeth had sharpened and stretched, incisors poking over his bottom lip. Vrykal, Malachi hissed. Kind of. Chains spun the bat at his side, sauntering closer and closer. The large woman was beside him, her features more bestial, but eyes just as yellow. Bit of Lycoan in there. The rest of M are purebred LYCS. But I tell ya, you are the strangest thing we've cornered in a minute. Almost didn't find you. Almost. But my girl here, he gestured at Fangs, has got the best nose in the city. Grinning, she tapped her bulbous nose. Malachi's eyes fluttered as his heart galloped. You have less fur than I thought. Translation error, Chains grinned. They come in all types. What bout you? Interested in how you hid your stink? You don't want to eat me. Not about want. My meat won't sit well in you. Chains went blank again. The large woman continued a few steps. He barred her way with the bat. She turned to him, confused. Suppose we just bash your head in then. It won't. Take. Malachi pressed his hands against the wall, hyperventilating. His limbs were longer, the skin stretched taut over knobby joints. Chains pushed the woman back behind him, careful not to touch her skin with the bat. He stepped closer and pushed it against Malachi's exposed stomach. The skinny man groaned as the skin sizzled beneath it. What's wrong? The woman asked, her voice deep and guttural. It hurts him. That's enough. The other onlookers had closed in, but no longer smiled or laughed. When Chains replied, his voice was soft. It irritates him. Like a sunburn. But it's not melting the skin. She took a step back on her own. Chains planted the top of the bat on the ground and put both hands on the bottom. He leaned close. You something new? Something old? Little of both. Chains gripped his shoulder. Kid, everyone's a monster to someone. But you didn't rise from the dark all hungry and mad and start eating people, did you? Malachi looked away again, tears welling in his eyes. I tried not to. Then some asshole came and pushed you, didn't he? I'm sorry. Don't be. You have no scent. Dozer couldn't have known. And you're brand new to this world, so neither could you. It's a shitty situation. Listening, Fangs had relaxed and moved to stand behind Chains. She towered over him. What is he? I don't think he knows, love. Didn't his family teach him? You got a family, kid? Malachi remembered being small in the dark, navigating by sense and vague outlines. I've always been alone. Since I was little. And you survived? Her voice was full of awe. Below. Malachi whimpered. Nodded. He didn't like thinking about it. Tough kid. You want a family? He didn't know how to respond. Chains snapped his fingers and held out a hand without looking away. Fangs smiled and passed over the blood-stained leather jacket. The leader held it out to Malachi. "We can be your family. We'll protect you. Teach you and learn what you can do." With shaking hands, Malachi reached out and took the jacket. He held it out, afraid to do more. "You got a name, kid?" "M. Malachi." Malachi's eyes shone with unshed tears as he grinned. It split his face from ear to ear, revealing rows of sharp, shark-like teeth as he put the jacket on. Chains and his mate sneered. "That's an alright, but it ain't no pack name." Chains sucked on his teeth and looked the boy up and down, staring at the wide mouth and the deep gouges in the brick. "I got it." He leaned back. Fangs bent forward and whispered into his mate's ear. She grinned. "You're one of us now. We're a badass pack, so you need a badass name." He straightened the jacket on Malachi's frame. "It'd have to be adjusted. From now on, we'll call you Saturn." He slapped the skinny man's thin shoulders, feeling bones like rebar. Feeling at home for the first time in his life, Saturn stood to his full height. Taller than Fangs, but thinner. "I like it." "Well, all right then," Chains said. "Welcome to the Hell Dogs." Their howl rattled the windows overlooking the alley. Malachi continued to pant. Beneath the taut skin, the odd, bulbous shape of his joints was more pronounced. The length of his arms was too long. From shoulder and elbow to wrist. The arms were ape-like compared to his body. "I don't want to fight." His fingers elongated, creaking like a stretched rubber hose. "But I will." The large woman growled. Bared her claws. Crouched. Tensed. Ready to lunge. Her mohawk flared as her hackles rose, adding height. Chains looked back and forth between them. Stepped back. Stepped up to a thick dumpster. He wound up the bat and swung as hard as he could. Clang. It reverberated through the alley. Curtains were drawn closed as silhouettes vanished and lights went out. Fangs and Malachi both jumped. He leveled the bat at his mate. "Let me handle this." He lowered the bat. "Please." "Why?" She growled. "I don't want more of our family to die." He turned his gaze on Malachi. "And I think a fair few of us will if we pick this fight." Chains stared at the skinny man, lips pressed into a thin line. He sighed, before bellowing behind him. "Get back. Stay close but give us space. If he tries to leave, let him. We're not picking this fight." They were shocked. Many grumbled. Some took a few steps forward anyway. Chains struck the dumpster again. Clang. And growled. It wasn't as deep as his mates, but it was higher pitched. Stranger. Nearly a shriek. Their advance stopped. Reversed. The glowing eyes vanished set by set. Fangs stayed where she was, ready to pounce. The intensity in Chain's eyes softened on her before he turned to Malachi and let the bat rest on the ground. "So. You imply you can't die. Maybe you can't. Doesn't mean we can't rip you apart and bury the pieces far away from each other." Malachi's eyes widened and he began to shake. "I don't understand." Chain smiled, but it was empty of the previous arrogance. "Now that is the most important thing you've admitted to. Because to be honest, I don't understand either. I think this is the most honest you've been. Up here." He leaned over to gaze up into Malachi's face. "Because you are from below." He tapped the bat on the ground. Malachi kept his hands pressed against the bricks and nodded. "Thought so. Flesh eater. Memory drinker. You got a bit lamia to your shape. Ain't seen one of those in a dog's age." Chains laughed. But they got a stink you can follow across the whole city. You. Almost no stink at all. No pack scent. No grave scent. He stepped closer. A rattle emanated from Malachi's throat as his claws scored the brick. Chains slowed but did not stop, raising his hands. Don't want to fight. Not anymore. Malachi let him approach. You don't know what you are. Not a question, but Malachi nodded, looking down and away. Hey. Chains drew his eyes back up. Never look away. The rest of the world will hate and shame you for what you are, it doesn't need your help. It doesn't deserve it. But I'm a monster. The Helldog's howl, a raw, guttural symphony of triumph and belonging, vibrated through Saturn's bones. It was a sound he'd never heard, yet it resonated with something ancient and primal within him, a stirring in the depths he barely understood. He stood there, the stolen leather jacket now his, the rough material a strange comfort against his skin, and for the first time in his life, he wasn't just alone. He was with. Chains clapped him on the shoulder again, the impact jarring but not painful. All right, Saturn. Welcome to the family. Now, let's get you cleaned up and fed. You look like a stray cat that fell into a sewer. The Helldogs began to disperse, melting back into the alley's shadows with a fluidity that spoke of long practice. Fangs, her towering frame still radiating a formidable aura, gave Saturn a calculating look before nodding curtly at Chains. Lead the way, Papa. Chains grinned, a flash of sharpened teeth in the dim light. Follow me, kid. Time you saw the Denver. The den was not what Saturn expected. He'd imagined a squalid, makeshift hideout, perhaps a derelict warehouse or a fortified basement. Instead, Chains led them through a series of increasingly cleaner, better-lit streets, past storefronts that seemed to have been recently scrubbed of their grime, until they reached a nondescript building that looked like a repurposed auto garage. A heavy, reinforced steel door, painted a faded industrial green, marked the entrance. Inside, the contrast was stark. The air, though still carrying faint whiffs of oil and metal, was warm and surprisingly clean. The main space was vast, lit by strings of bare bulbs that cast a warm, if harsh, glow over a collection of well-maintained motorcycles, weight benches, and a large, scarred wooden table that served as the heart of the Helldogs' communal area. Trophies of past skirmishes, a cracked street sign, a deflated basketball riddled with bat marks, a collection of intricately carved bone fragments adorned the walls. Several other Helldogs were already there, lounging on worn sofas or tinkering with bike engines. They looked up as Chains, Fangs, and Saturn entered, their yellow eyes narrowing in curiosity and suspicion as they took in the new, rail-thin figure. All right, listen up. Chains' voice boomed, cutting through the low hum of conversation. This here is Saturn. He's new. He's family now. You got a problem with that, you take it up with me. A few grumbled, but most simply nodded, their gazes lingering on Saturn's gangly form and the still too large jacket. One particularly burly Lycoan, with a thick beard and a perpetually scowling face, pushed himself off a sofa. He looks like he'd snap in a strong breeze, Chains. You sure about this one? Rusty, Fangs growled, her voice a low rumble that made the floor vibrate. You question Papa? Rusty held up his hands in mock surrender. Just asking, Fangs. No disrespect. He looked at Saturn, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Welcome to the den, kid. Try not to break. Chains clapped Saturn on the back, steering him towards a corner where a makeshift shower stall had been erected. Don't mind Rusty. He's got more bark than bite, most days. Now, you need a shower. And some real clothes. Fangs, get him sorted. Fangs, surprisingly, didn't argue. She led Saturn to the shower, handing him a clean towel and a bar of rough soap. Don't waste the hot water. And don't try anything stupid. We can smell fear, and you're practically dripping it. Saturn nodded, his throat tight. The shower was a revelation. The warm water sluiced away the grime, the sweat, and the lingering scent of fear and blood. He scrubbed until his skin was red, feeling a strange sense of cleansing, as if he were washing away not just the dirt, but the last vestiges of his old, terrified self. When he emerged, Fangs was waiting with a pile of clothes, a fresh, clean green shirt that was still too baggy, and a pair of dark, sturdy pants that actually fit his impossibly long legs. "Better," Fangs grunted, eyeing him critically. "Still look like a scarecrow, but a clean one." She then led him to the main table, where a steaming bowl of something meaty and savory had been placed. "Eat. Your skin and bones." Saturn ate. He hadn't realized how truly hungry he was until the rich, salty broth hit his tongue. It was unlike anything he'd ever tasted, far removed from the meager, often questionable fare of the pits. He devoured it, and then another bowl, and another, until the hell dogs around him were staring in open-mouthed astonishment. Chains watched him, a thoughtful expression on his face. "So, the pit. You said it was sealed up. How'd you get out, Saturn?" Saturn paused, a spoonful of stew halfway to his mouth. The question brought a fresh wave of unease. I don't know exactly. There are places. Hidden. Open. Small cracks. You can squeeze through if you know how." He remembered the tight, claustrophobic passages, the absolute darkness, the feeling of the earth pressing in on him. "It's not easy. And you survived down there. Alone." Fang's voice was softer now, tinged with a grudging respect. "That's something." He said he was small, Chains mused, leaning back in his chair. "How small? And how long ago?" Saturn struggled to put a timeline to his existence. Time below ground was different, measured by the ebb and flow of hunger and the occasional distant rumble of the city above. "I was always small. Always alone. It felt like, forever. The sounds. The echoes. The dark." He shuddered. "I just grew. And kept moving. Until I found a way up. And when you got up, you just started walking around?" Rusty asked, a hint of genuine curiosity replacing his earlier skepticism. "I didn't know where else to go," Saturn admitted, looking down at his empty bowl. "I saw the lights. Heard the sounds. It was loud. Bright. Confusing." Chains nodded slowly. "Makes sense. A newborn, effectively. But a newborn from hell." He paused, then gestured around the Denver. "All right, Saturn. This is home now. But there are rules. We're a pack. We protect our own. You mess with one of us, you mess with all of us. You steal from us, you answer to me. You betray us, well, you don't want to know what happens then." His voice dropped, becoming a low, dangerous growl. "But you're different. You got something in you. Something old. Something that even silver just irritates. That's a gift, kid. And we're gonna figure out what it is. Together." Saturn looked around at the faces, some still wary, some merely curious, but none openly hostile. He saw the yellow gleam in their eyes, the subtle shift in their features, the raw power simmering beneath their human facades. They were monsters, yes, but they were also a family. And for the first time, he felt a flicker of hope, a fragile sense of belonging that warmed him from the inside out. He was Saturn now. A hell dog. And his journey, it seemed, had only just begun. The days that followed blurred into a strange, exhilarating haze for Saturn. The den, initially a place of overwhelming newness, slowly began to feel less like a cage and more like, well, a den. A chaotic, often loud, but undeniably warm place. He learned the names of the other hell dogs, the gruff but surprisingly gentle Rusty, who often muttered about Saturn's fragile appearance, Whisper, a lean Lycoan with eyes that seemed to see everything in a habit of appearing out of nowhere, and a handful of others, each with their own quirks and a shared, fierce loyalty to chains. His first lessons were practical, brutal, and entirely necessary. Fangs, true to her word, took on the role of his primary instructor. She taught him how to navigate the city's labyrinthine streets, not by map, but by instinct and scent, though his own lack of a discernible scent remained a constant source of fascination and frustration for her. "You gotta feel the city, Saturn," Fangs would growl, her massive hand pointing at a distant, flickering neon sign. "Every alley, every shortcut, every blind spot. This ain't the pits, kid. Up here, shadows are just shadows until someone steps out of them." He learned to distinguish the subtle shifts in the city's hum, the difference between a distant siren and the closer, more urgent wail of a rival gang's alarm. He learned the unspoken rules of the street, when to blend, when to run, and when to stand his ground. He also learned that standing his ground usually involved chains or Fangs standing beside him. His physical training was less about building muscle, though he ate constantly, he remained stubbornly lean, and more about control. His elongated limbs, once awkward and unwieldy, slowly began to obey his will. Fangs put him through drills, teaching him to move with a predatory grace, to use his unusual reach to his advantage. He discovered a surprising agility, a spring in his step that allowed him to scale walls and leap across gaps with ease. The Helldogs watched, sometimes with grudging admiration, sometimes with a flicker of unease. "Still don't get how he does it," Rusty grumbled one evening, watching Saturn effortlessly vault over a stack of oil drums. "No bulk, no power. Just bounces." Chains, polishing his silver-dipped bat, merely smirked. "That's our Saturn. The pit's little secret." Despite the training and the camaraderie, Saturn remained an enigma. His past, the forever he'd spent alone in the dark, was a chasm no one could truly bridge. He rarely spoke of it, and when he did, his words were vague, laced with a deep-seated trauma that made even the hardened Helldogs uncomfortable. They learned not to press him, understanding that some horrors were best left buried. One night, while on patrol with Whisper, a lean, quiet Lycoan with eyes like amber chips, Saturn experienced something new. They were staking out a rival human gang's territory, hidden amongst the overflowing dumpsters of a narrow street. Whisper, usually so still, suddenly tensed. "Smell that?" Whisper murmured, his nostrils flaring. Saturn sniffed, but detected nothing out of the ordinary, just the usual city stench of exhaust, stale food, and damp concrete. "No. What is it?" "Something off," Whisper whispered, his voice barely audible above the distant rumble of traffic. "Like old blood. Too old. And something else. Like a chill on the air where there shouldn't be one." Saturn concentrated, pushing past the surface smells. He closed his eyes, letting his other senses take over. The city's hum began to separate into individual vibrations, the distant subway, the thrum of power lines, the scurrying of rats in the sewers below. And then, beneath it all, a faint, almost imperceptible wrongness. A subtle distortion in the air, a cold spot that seemed to pull at the edges of his awareness. It was like a whisper in a silent room, a shadow in absolute darkness. "I feel it," Saturn said, his voice hushed. "It's cold. And it's moving." Whisper's head snapped towards him, eyes wide. "You feel it? Not smell?" Saturn nodded, a strange prickling sensation on his skin. "It's not a smell. It's a presence. Like something that doesn't belong." They followed the sensation, moving silently through the night. It led them away from the human gang's territory, deeper into a neglected industrial zone, where abandoned factories loomed like skeletal giants. The cold intensified, and the air grew heavy, pressing down on Saturn like the earth of the pits. They found it in a derelict warehouse, its corrugated iron walls riddled with holes. A group of smaller, more feral, sounders, lycoans with matted fur and vacant, hungry eyes, were tearing at something on the concrete floor. But it wasn't an animal, or even a human. It was a thing. It was roughly humanoid, but its skin was a sickly gray, stretched taut over an unnaturally elongated frame. Its limbs were too long, too thin, ending in hands with too many joints. There were no eyes, just hollow sockets, and its mouth was a jagged tear in its face. It pulsed with the same cold, wrong energy Saturn had felt. The Sounders, usually vicious and territorial, were acting strangely. They weren't eating the thing, they were tearing at it with a frantic, almost desperate energy, as if trying to destroy it. And as they did, the thing pulsed, and a faint, high-pitched wail, just at the edge of human hearing, seemed to emanate from it, causing the Sounders to flinch and whimper. "What in the hells is that?" Whisper breathed, his usual composure shattered. Saturn didn't answer. He stared at the thing, a chilling recognition stirring in the deepest recesses of his memory. He'd seen things like this before. Down below. In the deepest, darkest parts of the pits. They were the ones that didn't have a scent. The ones that just were. And they were always followed by the cold. "It's from below," Saturn finally said, his voice flat. "Deeper than me." Whisper turned to him, his yellow eyes wide with a mixture of fear and dawning comprehension. "You know these things?" Before Saturn could answer, the Sounders, having finally torn the creature into enough pieces to silence its wail, suddenly became aware of their presence. Their heads snapped up, their feral eyes fixing on Saturn and Whisper. The cold dissipated, replaced by the familiar, aggressive scent of a rival pack. "Hell dogs," one of them snarled, a low, challenging growl. "What are you doing on our turf?" Whisper was already reaching for the blade strapped to his thigh. "Looks like we just found out what the off smell was, Saturn. And it looks like we're about to have some trouble." Saturn looked from the mangled remains of the strange creature to the snarling Sounders. His heart hammered, but it wasn't entirely fear. It was something else. A grim understanding. The pits were stirring. And whatever was coming up, it was bringing the cold with it. The snarled challenge from the Sounders hung in the air, thick with aggression and the metallic tang of their feral scent. Whisper, blade already in hand, didn't hesitate. He lunged, a blur of lean muscle and amber eyes, meeting the lead Sounder with a savage roar. The clash of bodies, the rip of fabric, and the guttural snarls filled the warehouse. Saturn, however, remained rooted for a beat longer, his gaze fixed on the mangled remains of the creature on the floor. The cold presence was gone, but the wrongness of it lingered, a psychic echo that made his skin crawl. He'd seen horrors in the pits, things that would make even the helldogs recoil, but those were the horrors of survival, of starvation and desperation. This was different. This was alien. Saturn. Move. Whisper's voice, strained with effort, jolted him back to the present. He spun, just in time to see a second Sounder, larger and even more matted with filth, lunging at him. Its eyes were vacant, its movements jerky and uncoordinated, as if driven by a mindless hunger. Saturn instinctively dropped low, his elongated arms sweeping out. His hand, surprisingly strong, connected with the Sounder's ankle, sending it sprawling. Before it could recover, Saturn was on it, his sharp teeth bared in a snarl he hadn't known he possessed. He didn't bite, but the raw, animalistic display was enough to make the Sounder whimper and scramble back, its eyes wide with a fear that wasn't entirely about physical pain. The fight was brutal, a chaotic dance of claws, teeth, and desperate blows. The Sounders, though numerous, lacked the discipline and coordinated savagery of the helldogs. They were driven by instinct, by a primal territoriality, but they were not strategic. Whisper, a seasoned fighter, moved like a shadow, his blade a silver blur, carving through their ranks with ruthless efficiency. Saturn, for his part, found a strange rhythm in the chaos. His long limbs became weapons, his newfound agility allowing him to dodge and weave through the fray. He wasn't as strong as Whisper, nor did he possess the Lycoan's sheer ferocity, but his unusual resilience proved invaluable. Blows that would have shattered a human bone merely bruised him. Scratches from razor claws stung but healed with alarming speed. He fought with a desperate, almost detached efficiency, his mind still half consumed by the image of the strange, grey creature. He saw Whisper take a deep gash on his arm, blood blossoming dark against his fur. Whisper! Saturn cried, a surge of protective instinct overriding his fear. He launched himself at the sounder responsible, tackling it with a force that surprised even himself. They crashed into a stack of rusty barrels, the clang echoing through the warehouse. Saturn scrambled to his feet, his shark-like grin splitting his face, a silent promise of pain. The sounder, seeing the raw, unhinged look in Saturn's eyes, hesitated, then turned and fled. The remaining sounders, seeing their numbers dwindle and the unexpected ferocity of the new Helldog, began to break. They scattered, melting back into the industrial shadows as quickly as they had appeared, leaving behind only the lingering scent of their fear and aggression. Whisper leaned against a support beam, breathing heavily, his arm clutched to his side. Damn, that was something. He looked at Saturn, his yellow eyes wide with a mixture of awe and concern. You went feral there for a second, kid. Saturn looked down at his hands, which were still slightly elongated, his nails sharper than usual. The snarl still felt present on his lips. He blinked, and slowly, his features softened, his hands returning to their normal, if still bony, appearance. I don't know what happened. Don't worry about it, Whisper said, pushing himself off the beam. Happens to the best of us. But, that thing. He gestured vaguely at the mangled remains of the grey creature. You said it was from below. Deeper than you. What the hell did you mean? Saturn walked over to the torn pieces, a shiver running down his spine. They don't have scent. Not like you. Not like me. They just are. And they bring the cold. He knelt, picking up a fragment of the creature's leathery skin. It was cold to the touch, unnaturally so, and seemed to absorb the ambient light. I saw them in the deepest parts. Where the tunnels went down and down. The ones the Empire tried to seal off. Whisper's face was grim. Chains needs to know about this. He's heard the stories, of course. The deep ones. Old wives' tales, he always said. But, this. He gestured to the corpse. This ain't no tale. They made their way back to the den, the silence between them heavy with the implications of what they had seen. The fight with the Sounders, brutal as it was, felt almost trivial compared to the chilling discovery of the Deep One. When they burst into the den, Chains was polishing his bat, fangs sharpening a wicked-looking knife. The other Helldogs looked up, their expressions shifting from casual to alert as they saw Whisper's bleeding arm and Saturn's haunted eyes. What happened? Chains demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Whisper quickly recounted the encounter with the Sounders, then pointed at Saturn. But that's not the half of it, Papa. Saturn here, he found something else. Saturn, still holding the fragment of the creature's skin, held it out to Chains. It's from below. Deeper than me. The pits are stirring, Chains. And it's bringing the cold with it. Chains took the fragment, his fingers brushing against the unnaturally cold surface. His eyes, usually so sharp and calculating, widened almost imperceptibly. He sniffed the air around it, then frowned. No scent. Nothing. Just, cold. He looked at Saturn, a new kind of intensity in his gaze. You said you'd seen these things before, kid. Saturn nodded, the memories pressing in on him. In the deepest tunnels. They were different. They moved strangely. They didn't make sounds. And they always brought the cold. He remembered the absolute, crushing silence of those depths, broken only by the faint, high-pitched wail he'd heard tonight. Fang stepped forward, her massive frame radiating unease. "Papa, the stories, they say these things aren't just monsters. They're something else. Something that shouldn't be here." Chain's jaw tightened. He looked at the fragment in his hand, then at Saturn, then at the other Helldogs, whose faces now reflected a growing fear. The casual bravado of the den had vanished, replaced by a palpable tension. "All right," Chain said, his voice low and serious, cutting through the rising anxiety. "Whisper, get that arm tended to. Rusty, double the patrols. Fangs, gather the intel. I want to know if anyone else has seen anything like this. Any strange disappearances, any unusual activity. And Saturn," he looked directly at him, his yellow eyes piercing, "you and I are going to have a long talk about what you saw down there. Everything. No matter how bad it is." The air in the den crackled with a new kind of energy, a grim determination mixed with a primal fear. The Helldogs were used to fighting rival gangs, to asserting their dominance in the city's brutal hierarchy. But this was different. This was something from the forgotten depths, something that threatened not just their turf, but perhaps the very fabric of their world. And Saturn, the quiet, scentless boy from the pits, was suddenly at the center of it all. The heavy steel door of Chain's office clanged shut, muffling the low hum of the Denver. It was a small, cluttered space, dominated by a scarred metal desk piled high with maps, ledgers, and an assortment of weaponry. The air was thick with the scent of old leather and something metallic, like ozone. Chain sat behind the desk, his yellow eyes fixed on Saturn, who stood awkwardly before him, the fragment of the Deep One's skin still clutched in his hand. "All right, kid," Chains began, his voice devoid of its usual bluster, a low, serious tone Saturn hadn't heard before. "Start talking. Everything. From the moment you remember anything down there. Don't leave out a single detail. No matter how crazy it sounds." Saturn swallowed, the memories a cold, swirling vortex in his mind. He began to speak, his voice hesitant at first, then gaining a strange, detached cadence as he recounted his existence in the pits. He described the perpetual darkness, broken only by the faint, distant glows of phosphorescent fungi or the occasional, terrifying flicker of fire from the arena above. He spoke of the constant hunger, the gnawing emptiness that drove him to scavenge, to hide, to survive. There was no sun, he said, his gaze unfocused, seeing the blackness of his past. Only echoes. Sounds that traveled for miles, distorted by the rock. And the cold. Always the cold, in the deepest places. He described the tunnels, a vast, intricate network that seemed to stretch endlessly. He spoke of the strange, mutated flora that clung to the damp walls, and the even stranger fauna, creatures that scurried in the dark, some blind, some with too many eyes, all driven by the same desperate need to survive. And the others, Chains prompted, leaning forward, his elbows on the desk. "The ones like you. The ones you called Vricolans, and Lycoan, and Lamia. Saturn shook his head slowly. "I didn't see many. Not like you. Not like Fangs. They were different. More extreme. Some had fur like a thick pelt, others were slick and pale, almost translucent. Their teeth were longer, their movements, unnatural. And they fought. Always fighting. For scraps. For territory. For a place to hide." He paused, a shiver running down his spine. "But the ones from the deepest places, they were the worst. The ones that looked like this." He held up the fragment of skin. "They didn't fight for food. They just were. And they brought the cold with them. A cold that wasn't just temperature. It was, inside. It made your thoughts slow. Made you want to stop moving. To just lie down." Chain's face was grim. "The stories. They called them the Deep Ones. Said they were the original inhabitants of the earth, disturbed by the Empire's digging. Or something the pits made. He looked at the fragment again. No scent. That's the part that gets me. Everything has a scent. Everything living. They don't live like you, Saturn said, his voice barely above a whisper. They just exist. And they spread. Spread? Chain's eyes narrowed. How? I don't know, Saturn admitted, frustration lacing his tone. I just saw more of them. The deeper I went, the more of the cold there was. And sometimes I saw others, Lycoans, Vricholans, near the cold. And they would change. Become like them. Slow. Empty. No scent. Chain slammed his fist on the desk, making Saturn jump. Possession. Corruption. What the hell are we dealing with here? I don't know, Saturn repeated, feeling helpless. I just ran. I kept running until I found a crack, a way out. And then I was here. He looked at Chains, his shark-like teeth briefly showing as his lips thinned. I didn't want to bring it with me. Chains stared at him for a long moment, then sighed, running a hand through his hair. No, kid. You didn't. But it looks like it's coming whether we want it or not. And you, Saturn, you're our early warning system. He picked up a worn map of the city, spreading it out on the desk. Whisper said you felt the cold. Can you track it? Sense where these things are coming from? Saturn closed his eyes, concentrating. He could still feel the faint echoes of the cold from the warehouse, a lingering psychic bruise. Maybe. It's like a wrongness. A pull. It's subtle, but it's there. Good, Chain said, a grim determination settling on his features. Because if these things are spreading, if they're turning our kind into, that, he gestured at the fragment, then we got a whole new kind of war on our hands. And the Helldogs ain't losing our city to some ancient, scentless horrors. He picked up a pen, marking a few spots on the map. Fangs is already out, checking the usual disappearance spots. Rusty's got the patrols doubled. We need to find out where these things are coming up. And we need to find out why. He looked at Saturn, his yellow eyes blazing. You're our eyes and ears on this, kid. You feel that cold, you tell me. Immediately. No matter what. Saturn nodded, a strange mix of fear and purpose stirring within him. He was no longer just running. He was fighting. And he was fighting for his new family. Later that night, as the den settled into a restless quiet, Saturn lay on a cot in a corner, unable to sleep. The sounds of the city above, usually a comforting cacophony, now seemed to carry a faint, almost imperceptible undertone of that chilling cold. He closed his eyes, trying to block it out, but the images of the gray creature, its hollow sockets, its silent wail, haunted him. He was from the pits. He was a monster. But these deep ones, they were something else entirely. Something that made even the Helldogs, the proud, brutal masters of the city, feel a cold dread in their bones. And Saturn, the one who carried the knowledge of those depths, knew that this was just the beginning. The pit was stirring, and its ancient horrors were finally reaching for the surface. The den, usually a cacophony of engines, boasts, and laughter, was a hive of grim activity. Chain's orders had cut through the usual relaxed atmosphere like a silver-dipped blade. Rusty, his arm bandaged but his scowl more pronounced than ever, was organizing patrols, his voice a low rumble as he assigned territories and strict rendezvous points. Fangs, a silent, imposing shadow, moved through the den, her nose twitching, gathering whispers and rumors from the returning Helldogs. Every face held a flicker of the fear that Chains had so deftly contained in his office. Saturn, despite the late hour, felt a strange surge of energy. The cold, the wrongness of the deep ones, was a terrifying presence, but it also gave him a purpose. He was no longer just the scared, lost creature from the pits. He was a tool, a sensor, and for the first time, he felt genuinely needed. Chains found him by the map, his finger tracing the lines of the city. "All right, Saturn. You're with me. Fangs too. We're going to start where Whisper found that thing. See if you can pick up the trail." "What about the others?" Saturn asked, glancing at the busy Helldogs. "They'll hold the perimeter, keep the Sounders off our backs, and watch for anything new crawling out of the woodwork," Chains replied, his voice tight. "This ain't a full-scale war yet, but it's close. We need intel. And you're our best chance at finding the source." The trio moved through the pre-dawn streets, a silent, predatory unit. Chains, bat resting on his shoulder, moved with a coiled power. Fangs, her mohawk a dark silhouette against the faint city glow, seemed to melt into the shadows, her senses constantly sweeping their surroundings. Saturn, despite his awkward gait, found himself moving with a newfound confidence, his heightened senses alert for the subtle psychic chill that marked the Deep One's presence. They reached the derelict warehouse where Whisper had found the creature. The air still held a faint, lingering trace of the Deep One's cold, a ghostly echo that made Saturn's skin prickle. The stench of the Sounder's recent struggle was still strong, but beneath it, the chilling wrongness was clearer here. "Anything?" Chains asked, his voice low. Saturn closed his eyes, pushing past the surface sensations. He focused on the cold, letting it guide him. It wasn't a physical trail, not a scent or a footprint. It was a resonance, a discordant note in the city's symphony. "This way," he murmured, pointing towards a crumbling section of the warehouse wall. "It's stronger here. Like it came through." Chains and Fangs exchanged a look. "An old tunnel?" Fangs rumbled. "Maybe," Saturn said, already moving towards the wall. He pressed his hand against the cold, rough brick. "There's a weakness. A crack. It's sealed, but not completely. It's like the city tried to forget it, but couldn't quite." Chains examined the wall, then gestured to Fangs. "Give me some room." He swung his bat, not with full force, but with a precise, controlled impact. The chain-wrapped head struck a specific point, and a spiderweb of cracks spread across the brick. He hit it again, and a small section of the wall crumbled inwards, revealing a dark, narrow opening. A blast of stale, earthy air, heavy with the scent of damp rock and ancient dust, billowed out. And with it, the cold intensified, chilling Saturn to the bone. "Well, ain't that a sight," Chains muttered, peering into the darkness. "Looks like one of the old Empire's escape routes. Or maybe an entrance they thought they'd buried." Fangs sniffed the air, her brow furrowed. "The scent, it's faint, but it's there. Other Sounders. They've been in and out of here. They're following the cold too," Saturn realized, a grim understanding settling over him. "They're drawn to it. And then, they change." Chains nodded. "All right. Fangs, your point. Saturn, you're our compass. I'll cover the rear." Entering the tunnel was like stepping back into Saturn's nightmares. The darkness was absolute, pressing in on him, bringing with it the familiar, suffocating weight of the earth. The air was thick and still, carrying the faint, unsettling echoes of his past. Fangs moved with surprising grace in the gloom, her Lycoan senses guiding her. Chains followed, his bat occasionally scraping against the rough walls, a grounding sound in the oppressive silence. Saturn, however, was in his element. The cold, once a source of terror, was now a beacon. It pulsed ahead, a faint, malevolent heartbeat guiding them deeper into the forgotten passages. He could feel the subtle shifts in the tunnel structure, the ancient, crude carvings on the walls, the faint vibrations of water seeping through unseen cracks. "It's getting colder," Saturn whispered, his voice echoing eerily. "And, there's something else." A hum. Very low. Like something vibrating deep in the earth. Fangs stopped, her head cocked. "I hear it. And a faint scent. Not Deep One. Something, metallic. And electricity. Humans, Chains grunted. Down here? What in the hells are they doing? The tunnel opened into a vast, cavernous space. Unlike the rough, natural passages, this chamber was clearly man-made, its walls smoothed and carved with ancient, faded symbols that seemed to writhe in the faint light. In the center of the cavern, a makeshift camp had been set up. Crude lights, powered by a sputtering generator, cast flickering shadows across a group of figures huddled around a strange, humming contraption. They were human. But they weren't ordinary. They wore dark, hooded robes, and their faces, when the light caught them, were gaunt and pale, their eyes wide with a fanatic intensity. They were chanting, a low, repetitive drone that resonated with the hum of the machine. And the deep one cold, emanated from the contraption, a chilling aura that made Saturn's teeth ache. Cultists, Fangs growled, her lips peeling back from her teeth. Always the freaks. Chain's face was grim. They're trying to open something. Or bring something through. He looked at Saturn, then back at the chanting figures. This is why the pits are stirring, kid. These fools. They're pulling it up. One of the cultists, a tall, skeletal figure with a staff topped with a glowing, pulsating crystal, suddenly looked up. His eyes, devoid of normal human warmth, fixed on Saturn. A slow, chilling smile spread across his face. The scentless one, he hissed, his voice echoing in the cavern. He has come. The herald of the awakening. The chanting stopped. All eyes in the cavern turned to Saturn, not with fear, but with a terrifying reverence. Saturn felt a wave of profound dread wash over him. He wasn't just a guide. He was part of their twisted prophecy. He was the key.